Today, we're diving into a case that unfolds in two completely different realities. We're going to look at one man, Michael Merryman, through two very distinct lenses. First as a criminal suspect, and then as a psychiatric patient. And you'll see how the line between accountability and illness gets incredibly blurry.
So, let's start right here. This is a direct quote from Michael's medical file. And wow, this one sentence just drops us straight into his world, right? It's this constant, terrifying battle against voices in his own head. It's not just a symptom, it's a description of his daily existence. Okay, so let's begin with that first reality, the one seen through the eyes of law enforcement. We're in Shasta County, California, and a serious criminal investigation is just getting started. So, the facts of the case as they come in are really grim. On May 6th, police get a call, a property owner finds burned-out vehicles, and then makes a horrific discovery: 2 bodies. And that's the moment a major crimes investigation kicks off. So here are the key details from that initial investigation. The victims are quickly identified as Cynthia Duran and Luis Sanchez. The location is that Shasta County property. And right away, Michael Merryman is named as a suspect. Investigators move fast, getting a search warrant for his Facebook accounts to look for any clues or a motive. All right, now I want you to put that police file aside for a moment because we're going to completely switch gears. We're opening a different file now, a medical chart. And in this reality, Michael Merryman isn't a suspect, he's a patient, and he's in the middle of a profound psychiatric crisis. This quote from one of his clinical interviews really gets to the heart of his delusion. He has this unshakable belief that when he used meth, microchips were injected into his body. And listen to how he describes it. He doesn't just think they're there, he feels them. For him, this is a physical, undeniable truth. And it's so important to understand that this delusion isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a much bigger, much more complex clinical picture. His chart is filled with notes about command auditory hallucinations, voices telling him to hurt himself. He has a history of actually doing it. And his formal diagnoses are incredibly serious: schizophrenia, major depressive disorder, and several substance use disorders all at once. And you can see how these delusions start to evolve and warp his behavior. That core belief about microchips leads to this new, specific fear that the staff at the facility are trying to get those tracking devices out of him by collecting his feces. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating, because this shows the internal logic. From our perspective, the behavior is deeply concerning, but from his, it makes perfect, rational sense. Step 1. You believe your food is being used to track you. Step 2, you fear people are trying to collect your waste to get those trackers. Well, what's the logical conclusion? Step 3, you have to hide it to protect yourself. It's an act of self-preservation. So, you can imagine what it takes to manage a patient with this level of acute illness, especially inside a correctional facility. The challenges for the clinical team are just immense. Just take a look at this. This table gives you a quick snapshot of the sheer complexity of his treatment. It's a classic case of polypharmacy, using multiple heavy-duty medications at once. You've got powerful antipsychotics like clozapine and Seroquel, a mood stabilizer, an antidepressant, even medication for his opioid use disorder. It's a real chemical balancing act. And that balancing act is a 24/7 job. Staff have to be on constant alert for dangerous side effects like tardive dyskinesia. That's a movement disorder that can be irreversible. Because of the command hallucinations, he's often on suicide watch. There are standing orders for nurses to encourage fluids, just to help his body process this intense medication load. And of course, there's constant blood work to make sure drugs like lithium and clozapine stay in that very narrow therapeutic window. But, and this is a really important but, amidst all this crisis and chaos, the medical records show us another side of the story. They document these moments of real progress, of resilience, of hope. 8 years. That's how long Michael Merryman had previously stayed sober while he was incarcerated. Think about that. This number is so critical because it proves he has a capacity for recovery. It shows that despite his severe underlying illness, he has a history of being able to manage his substance use. And the clinicians who worked with him, they saw this firsthand. When they wrote their assessments, they didn't just list his problems. They actually identified his strengths. They specifically noted his ability to ask for help when he needed it, and his resilience as key protective factors, the tools he could actually use to fight for his own stability. And here is a perfect, concrete example of those protective factors in action. A note from a group therapy session describes another patient getting in his face, trying to provoke him.
The old response might have been violence, but instead, Merryman was able to hold his ground, not react, and then go get support from the staff. He was actively using his coping skills.
So this brings us to the core conflict, right? We have the suspect from the police report, and we have the patient from the medical chart, and they're the same person. On one side, you have the suspect in a homicide investigation, period. On the other, you have a patient who hears voices telling him to bleed, who lives in a world of microchips, and who is so profoundly ill that he requires this incredible level of psychiatric intervention. These two realities aren't separate. They exist at the exact same time in the same man. And that leaves us with this incredibly difficult question. Our justice system is really built on the idea of accountability. You're responsible for your actions. But when those actions might be completely inseparable from the symptoms of a severe mental illness, what does accountability even mean then? What does it look like? That's the complex, uncomfortable reality at the very heart of this case.